Pleased to be joined with longtime general manager, now with CBS Sports, Rick Spielman. Of course, a buddy of our buddy, Pete Prisco, too. Rick, talking...
You're using that term loosely.
Loosely. Okay. Well, listen, you always come every August with Prisco, and, he thinks he's the mayor of Jacksonville, but we know there's plenty of Rick fans down in Duval County.
Yeah, no, it's always exciting, and everything that's going down there. And, last year I got an opportunity for the first time to see the new facility and how everything is moving in the right direction down there. And so going down there with Pete, and it was actually my first time I've ever been to training camp without being a GM. So Pete was my guide, and I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's the only time I ever went with someone from the media that actually wore a teal golf shirt to an event to represent a team. I said, Pete, you got to be neutral. He goes, no, I'm the Duval County mayor, or whatever the heck he says.
Well, hey, listen, we appreciate both of you guys. We appreciate you spending time in Jacksonville. So you're familiar with this roster, the expectations that were so sky high last year, coming off of that playoff run in 2022. What did you make of the Jaguars season?
I just think they kind of lost their rhythm. And in the past, it's always been a slow start and then a strong finish. And I remember, after that Denver game in London, then all of a sudden, I thought Trevor Lawrence took off. He made a couple of critical interceptions in that game and then came back and then got into a rhythm, and the defense was playing well. And then the great playoff win. And then this year just didn't seem, in my opinion, they were in rhythm all the time, or they just couldn't find a lot of the answers. And I know a lot of it has to do with Trevor, but he was hurt. And give him credit for gutting it out and trying to go out there and play with the injuries that he had. But I think they have a lot of pieces in place down there, and I'd expect them to rebound from probably a disappointing season off what they did the previous year.
You believe the pieces are there. You can say they were injured, Trevor was injured, and run it back.
Yeah, but you can say that about every NFL team, too. So I don't think I've ever been associated with a team in 30-some years that didn't have an injury. But I do think that they, especially at the quarterback position and some of the key people that they lost, that they'll continue to build that. I know Trent will do a great job adding again to the draft. I know they made the defensive coordinator change down there to get Trevor back on track. I remember Pete telling me that he thought he was going to be MVP of the league last year, which I think he has all the capability of doing.
Absolutely. Let's move to the draft then. With the 17th overall pick, the Jacksonville Jaguars select
the best player on their draft board. I think there'll be a lot of good players there, whether they go offensive line, potentially, it's a real deep receiver class. They can go defense, maybe add another corner, because I think there'll be some corners there. So when you're picking down in the lower teens, a lot of times you have to wait to see how the draft board's unfolding. You may not have a legit number one guy that I have to have, because there's a lot of good players that can fill a lot of needs for Jacksonville down there. When you have the number one overall pick, you already know who that's going to be. But there, you got to be prepared for whatever happens during the draft, because there's so much that goes on, and you have to be able to react instantly. If there's a player, let's say you wanted a corner, and all of a sudden there was a run on corners, then do you try to get aggressive and move up? If some other team ahead of you may take the last corner you have on your board. So that you got to really make sure that your draft board's developed, that you have enough options, and that you have the options of moving up or down depending on what happens with other teams.
Doug and Trent, very complimentary of their veteran offensive linemen, whether that's Cam Robinson, whether that's Brandon Scherf this past week. Some Jaguar fans wondering if that's smoke, or if they truly believe that offensive line, that the one they want, only played one of 17 games healthy together, as Doug noted to me earlier in the week. If that really is the answer, just getting that offensive line healthy, or do you have to go into the draft and find some new pieces?
I think you have to get them healthy, because they are good when they're healthy, and that showed that the previous year. But you also have to know, well, they're not healthy all the time, too. So how big of a concern do we have with the longevity of a Scherf, for example? Can he play a full 17 games? If he can't, we know he can win games when he's on the field, but who's behind him? Can he step in and fill where we don't fall off as much as we had to this year? So I think, offensive line is definitely going to be one of the places that they end up looking in that 17th overall pick.
Last one from me. Ryan Nielsen comes over from Atlanta as the defensive coordinator. A lot of conversation about how philosophically the scheme that he runs requires different players. As a former GM, did you ever have that situation where a coordinator comes in and you say, hey, maybe we do need to turn over the roster a little more than we anticipated because we need the scheme fit?
Yeah, that's tough on a GM. I've been through that numerous times when you have coaching changes because you're building a roster to fit a specific scheme. And so you're drafting those players to fit that scheme. And then all of a sudden a new philosophy comes in, but you just can't take all 11 starters and throw them out the window. How can we make what we have work, and then what are you looking for so when we make additions, it'll fit your scheme?
Do you think the Jaguars will be overhauling a little bit on defense, knowing what Ryan Nielsen likes to run?
I didn't have the opportunity to sit in their post-draft meetings or post-season meetings, and I'm sure they identified strengths and weaknesses in the new scheme. So I have pretty good confidence they'll be able to handle that without my opinion.
Last one, Rick, the corner class in particular. It's pretty tough. It's pretty elite at the top, but there is some good depth. I know Chris Sims was just commenting the same to me. A lot of Jaguar fans, after Trent Baalke said we need to identify our third corner, now think corner at 17 is inevitable. What do you make of this year's class?
I think it's a really good 5 or 6, but I think they all have a different skill set. So some are better in man, but not as good in zone. Some are better in zone, but not as good as man. Some can play multiple positions. I don't think there's a clear-cut primetime Deion Sanders in this draft, or they'd be in the top 10. But I think teams will have those corners stacked on their board differently according to how their skill set fits their scheme.
Who do you think is the best man corner?
Boy, I can't. Well, I do like Wiggins from Clemson. I think can play man. I really thought that he did a great job in man coverage, but the guy that I think is going to be a really good player that's not being mentioned in that top 5 is Rakestraw, the corner from Missouri, because I think he's a tone setter on defense. I think he can play man coverage, and I think he's going to surprise a lot of people with his NFL career.
Rick, thanks so much. Always welcome in Duval.
Okay, thank you.
You don't have to bring Pete.